Okay, hello again, and we're going to look at some more basic aspects of writing, and especially this is, while all of these things apply to writing in general, these are in particular important in media writing. Okay, so anything we talk about here at the moment would be true in any sort of writing that you do for the most part, but these are in particular important for media writing. One of my little pet peeves, and my wife will attest to this, is misuse of pronouns. And this is very confusing in speech when we're just talking with someone. We get lost of who we're referring to when we say he or she, when too many names are involved, and we forget who does he refer to, who does she refer to. It also gets confusing in writing, as it says here, among the most confusing parts of speech. Overuse or careless use of pronouns will leave the reader confused. So who do we mean by he? Who do we mean by she? It depends on how the sentence is written. So here's a video. We're just going to look at part of this.
If your words can be misinterpreted, assume that they will be. Work specifically to revise pronouns to make sure that they cannot be misunderstood. In my tutorial on a precise style, I gave tips for using precise verbs, nouns, and pronouns. Now I'm going to expand on the idea of using precise pronouns. The great thing about pronouns is that they make our writing less cumbersome. Instead of writing Randy washed Randy's car, we can write Randy washed his car. Longer sentences, however, can have multiple nouns or ideas that a pronoun might refer to and might increase the possibility for confusion. So what are common pronouns that confuse? Well, first, unclear personal pronouns. Personal pronouns are words like I, you, he, she, and so forth. For example, yesterday Andrea met with Nancy, who knows about the situation, so contact her if you want to learn more. The word her could refer to Andrea or to Nancy. It may be that the writer means Andrea. After all, Andrea is the subject of the sentence and can probably share things that she learned from Nancy. On the other hand, maybe the writer means contact Nancy. After all, Nancy is the one who knows about the situation. For precision, the writer should replace her with either Andrea or Nancy, depending on which person should be contacted. Second, unclear relative pronouns.
Okay, let's go back. I'm just going to leave it at this, but let's go back to this particular sentence. So this is a good example of what I was talking about. Yesterday, Andrea met with Nancy, who knows about the situation. So contact her if you want to learn more. Her Andrea or her Nancy. So if it's Andrea, you would say, so contact Andrea if you want to learn more. Or if it's Nancy, so contact Nancy if you want to learn more. Okay? So that's an example of how pronouns can be very unclear if we're not careful. And cause some problems in being understood, and which is the most important thing of all, being understood. Common grammar problems. I don't know that active and passive voice are necessarily grammar issues. Maybe syntax would be a better word there. Don't worry about that. But it's not so much a grammatical issue, but we tend to prefer, in media writing especially, active voice. Now, this is a thing that's somewhat hard to describe and to explain, but fortunately, we have a video here, and we're going to look at at least the first part of this video. Active voice over passive voice.
Here at UBC, as part of an ambitious project involving instructors, students, staff, and talking squirrels, we are developing videos to help you with your writing skills, because communicating science effectively is an incredibly important part of being a good scientist. Grammar Squirrel and her friends have heard that using the active voice is a good way to get their message across in a succinct, clear manner. But they don't really know what the difference is between the active and the passive voice. After spending some time with her nose in a book, Grammar Squirrel explains with the help of an example. First, she says, it's important to work out what the subject of the sentence is. This is nice and easy. It's just the first meaningful part of the sentence that comes before the verb. Now, in the active voice, the subject actively performs the action which is described by the verb. So, in this example, the instructor is actively choosing the squirrel's partner. In the passive voice, however, the action described by the verb is performed on the subject, rather than by the subject. So, why does this matter? You'll notice that the image arising from these two sentences is the same. But there is a subtle difference, and it lies in how succinct the two versions are. Grammar Squirrel's friends remember that they should always strive to be short and snappy in their writing, and using the active voice will help them achieve this. In the first example, the passive version sounded a little bit clumsy, and it also used more words than the clear, succinct, active voice version.
Okay, let's pause here for a second. So which sounds more graceful? Which sounds which is more pleasing to the ear? And there can be a difference of opinion. But the instructor chose the squirrel's lab partners, straight and direct. The squirrel's lab partners were chosen by the instructor. The first version in media writing is the one that we would prefer. And as he says there in the video, it's because it, if nothing else, it's shorter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 words versus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you say, well, it's only 2 words. Well, add that up over a 1,000-word essay or a 10,000-word piece of writing, and it starts to make a difference. And as readers that we are very grateful to anyone who in every opportunity expresses himself or herself as directly and clearly and succinctly as possible and makes our job of being a reader easier. So we prefer active voice over passive voice. There's another good example. There's an old folk song. This was actually a hit record, if you can imagine, in the early 1960s. I won't sing it for you, but the name of the song is Michael Rowed the Boat Ashore. Michael is the subject. Rowed is the verb. What did Michael row? The boat. And if you turn that around, then you have the boat was rowed ashore by Michael, which I think most people would agree is a little bit awkward. And it's hard to sing, I'll tell you that. Again, I won't inflict that on you. But the object, which is the boat, is acted upon by the subject, Michael. And this is awkward. And again, it is wordier. So we prefer active voice. So take whoever's doing the action. The boy hit the ball. Michael rowed the boat. Whoever is performing the action, strive to make that person the subject of the sentence, whoever's taking the action. And there are exceptions to that. I think I have one here, as a matter of fact. Use passive voice if the emphasis needs to be on those who receive the action. So in the terrible event of the assassination of President Lincoln, the focus would totally be on President Lincoln. So President Lincoln was assassinated at Ford's Theater last night is passive voice, but it's appropriate because the person who receives the action here, unfortunately, tragically, should be our focal point. And so that is a case where passive voice would be appropriate. Misplaced modifiers. This is, I am not by profession a grammarian, teacher of grammar, so this one's a little bit more difficult to explain, but I have a very good video to show you. And this has to do with writing your sentences so that they say what you mean, and that they are precise. Okay, so here we go.
There's no problem here. Now the problem occurs when you put an adjective or a phrase or clause in the wrong part of a sentence, and it can confuse the reader, and sometimes it can actually accidentally change the meaning of the sentence. Okay, so that is what we call a misplaced modifier. Let me show you some examples. We almost ate all of the sandwiches. Chasing a squirrel up a tree, my grandmother saw her cat Fluffy. And she wore a pink summer hat on her head, which was much too big. Now, each one of these sentences contains a mistake in modifiers. The first one is a mistake with the word almost. It's very common for students to make mistakes with what we call limiting adverbs, words like almost, only, barely, hardly, nearly. Now in this sentence, I don't mean that we almost ate all the sandwiches. Actually, what I should be saying is that we ate almost all of the sandwiches. All right? You want the word almost to be as close to all as possible. Okay? In the second sentence, you have to change the order around because according to this sentence, my grandmother is chasing a squirrel up a tree. And that's probably not what I mean. So if you flip it around and say, my grandmother saw her cat Fluffy chasing a squirrel up a tree, now the modifying phrase, chasing a squirrel up a tree, is as close to the noun cat as possible. And number 3, she wore a pink summer hat on her head, which was much too big. In this case, I'm suggesting that her head is too big and not the hat. So you have to fix that. Instead, you would say, she wore a pink summer hat, which was much too big. I removed the phrase on her head because where else do you wear a hat?
Okay, that's an important point. That's part of being avoiding wordiness. Of course she wore the hat on her head. Would she wear it? Where else would she wear it? You don't need to say on her head. So there's 3 words right there we can save. And again, you say 3 words. Well, 3 words in this sentence, 2 words in that sentence, 1 word in this one, 2 words in that one. It adds up over the course of a story, whatever writing assignment it might be. So this is, again, part of saying, making the writing say what you want it to say. And again, you go back and read something after you've written it, and you realize, oh gosh, that's not what I meant to say, and how can I make it better? So that's part of the editing process that we've talked about, and not being too easily satisfied with your writing. What's wrong with this sentence? After driving from Georgia to Texas, Tom's car finally gave out. That sounds like Tom's car is doing the driving. Now the car is moving, of course, but it's Tom who is doing the driving. The car doesn't drive itself. You drive the car, or Tom drives the car. So after driving from Georgia to Texas, Tom was frustrated when his car finally gave out. It's Tom that did the driving. After driving from Georgia to Texas, Tom was frustrated when his car finally gave out. Okay, so it matters how you order the words in the sentence. And again, we want it to, as media writers, professional writers, we want to say precisely what we mean. Apostrophes sometimes cause, this is less of an egregious thing, I think, but an apostrophe indicates a possessive situation, the man's hat. We don't use apostrophes to form plurals. And I see this all the time, even in professional writers writing. The 1960s, that's plural, meaning the years that fell during the period from 1960 to 1969. There's 10 years there. And we're talking about those 10 years. So we're talking about a plural, something that is plural, not possessive. So we would not use the apostrophe there. Punctuation, commas cause all kinds of problems. Let's look at a video here on comma placement.
How to use commas correctly. Commas are tricky little things. Unless we are writers of a certain caliber or editors, little do we know where exactly to put commas, why commas should be used instead of other punctuation marks, or how to use commas correctly. But for all their sneakiness, commas must follow certain rules. Knowing these rules will help us master their use. When we write as we speak, we tend to put commas where we would naturally pause for breath. It's a good basic guide, but it's not always correct. There are other rules to remember besides.
Okay, I'm just going to call your attention to that little item there. And as she says this, that's not the whole story, but it is one suggestion. And it's a helpful thing to think about, that commas tend to go where there would be a pause. If you spoke the sentence, where would you pause slightly? And that's very imprecise and not at all the best way to explain this, but it is, I think, helpful. And in a pinch, more often than not, you'll be right if you understand that as you're speaking, like right here, I'm pausing. Be a good place for a comma. So the comma goes where there likely would be a pause if you were speaking the sentence. Okay.
Here we will see where and when to use commas. 1. When you have a list of 3 or more items in a series, but not when there are only 2. For example, we chopped, comma, sliced, comma, and cooked the vegetables, but not here. We were prepared to play and to win. 2. When you need to separate an introductory phrase. For example, while driving, comma, he glanced at the rearview mirror to check behind him. 3. When setting apart a transitional expression. He warned, comma, however, comma, that the test could be difficult.
I'll pause this here. I'm not going to show you the rest of this, and I hope that you will watch it on your own. Another way to discuss this is if you can take a word or a phrase out of the sentence and the sentence still makes sense and the sentence is still a complete sentence, then likely there should be a comma there. So we could write this sentence, he warned that the test could be difficult. We don't have to say the word however. And again, would we pause when we read this sentence aloud? He warned, however, that the test would be difficult. So there's another example of using commas where there is a pause. So if you can take the word or the phrase out, and here's another example, we could write this sentence simply, he glanced at the rearview mirror to check behind him. That's a complete sentence and it's a full thought and it makes sense. While driving adds to the meaning of that sentence, but the sentence would be a sentence without that phrase. And so while driving is set off with a comma. Again, there would be a pause there. While driving, he glanced at the rearview mirror behind him. So that pause, little thing about the pause can lead you astray at times, but again, more often than not, it probably will, at least if nothing else, give you some sense of where to place that comma. Okay, that's more or less what I just told you. That was in the video. Some of you know something called the Oxford comma. I'm not going to get into that here. We might have a chance to talk about it later, but here we are not using the Oxford comma. Problems in comma usage. What else? Comma splices. When two independent clauses form a compound sentence. Two independent clauses means basically what could be two separate sentences, but we're trying to join them together in a compound sentence. But they must be connected by a comma and a conjunction. And I think, as a matter of fact, was it in this outline in this video, or was it in the one last time? We've already covered this in a video. I ran down the street, he ran after me. That's going to be much better if we write, I ran down the street, comma, and he ran after me. We need that conjunction there, the and, for that really to read as it should. Semicolons, I'm not going to spend time on this right now with you. Semicolons join two independent clauses to form a compound sentence. The semicolon could have been used in that previous sentence. He ran down the street. Semicolon, I ran after him. Semicolons just are not used very much in media writing, however. And we could look at the today's edition of the Dallas Morning News, and I'll bet you we find very few semicolons in it. Or we could study the 6 p.m. Newscast on Channel 8 last night, and I'll bet we would not find maybe any semicolons in it. So I'm not a big fan of the semicolon as its place, but it's just not used very much in media writing. So I think I'll leave it at that. Colons, however, generally introduce a list. The course requires these supplies: pencils, paper, and a binder. And you see the comma there. But that's the correct use of a colon as opposed to a semicolon. Spelling, a professional writer does not produce writing with misspelled words. And you are training to be media professionals and therefore professional media writers. So just don't misspell words. And there's so much help now on the internet. And Grammarly is a great thing, which is free. And of course your spell check and there's all kinds of things that will help you in that didn't exist not so very long ago. This is entirely within your control, so avoid misspelling. Misspellings, especially maybe more than one in a story, are going to really sort of give you away as not professional. And I think you can look at this on your own. I believe, however, that it says optional, and we will let it go at that. So thanks, and we'll see you next time.